Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Film School this Wednesday, the 19th of August 2020. My name is Adam Warner, and today we are talking about all the films that we watched this week. And our big topic for the week is none other than Showgirls, the 1995 film. Today I also have joined with me the co-host and the film guru himself, Josh. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well, thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I also have the final girl and the scary movie maiden, Emily Pratt. How you doing, Emily?
Hey Adam, I'm good, thank you.
And last but not least, the rom-com expert, Kris Birchie. How you doing, Kris?
Hey mate, I'm good.
Good to hear, good to hear. So for those of you who don't know, just to reiterate, we're a podcast where we talk about the films that we've watched throughout the week and then jump into a big topic. You can follow us and the movies that we watch on Letterboxd. We have J. Luke for Josh, Emily Pratt for Emily, Kris Birchie for Kris, and King Frogby for myself. We also have a fantastic Instagram that has just started, and that is run by Emily, and it's films underscore cool podcast. All right, let's start the show. What have everyone been watching this week?
So I watched a classic of mine. I watched Clue, which is a 1985 black comedy whodunit film based off the board game known by the same name, or Cluedo if you're from this part of the world. It was directed by Jonathan Lynn, who wrote the script with John Landis. John Landis is a well-renowned comedy film writer whose credits include Animal House, The Blues Brothers, Trading Places, and Coming to America. Clue stars Tim Curry, Christopher Lloyd, Eileen Brennan, Leslie Ann Warren, and more. This is such a nostalgic classic for me. I remember seeing it for the first time as a midday movie on Channel 10 when I was in primary school. It was funny then, and it's funny now. I don't want to get too much into the plot because it sort of spoils a good whodunit, but somehow it manages to be funny, dark, true to the board game, and yeah, it just all works. There is some really classic witty one-liners, some great body humor, and the most Tim Curry performance of all time. Fun fact about this movie is that it has three endings, and each cinema got sent their reels at random, so you never knew which ending you were going to get when you went to see it. With the help of nostalgia, I couldn't give this anything other than a 5, but it is a genuinely fun and funny time I would recommend checking out. It has just been re released on Blu ray for anyone who is interested.
So I'm actually halfway through this film as we speak, and it is great so
It
far.
is so good, isn't it?
Yep.
And it gets better. It holds up completely. Great running time, too. 90-minute movie.
So,
Nice.
Josh, if we watch it now, does it allow us to have the three different endings?
So the way this has been packaged for home release and the way I've always seen it is that they have the three endings play in a row at the end and they sort of explain it in a funny sort of way.
Okay.
But on the Blu-ray edition, you also have the option of watching it with a random ending attached.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's a fun little fact. And yeah, just highly recommended.
That's such an interesting concept and really cool. Yeah, I highly recommend it so far as well. Like, it's great.
Tim Curry is so good in it. It's like just he has that such a self-aware comedic snark that I just love.
Yep.
Nice.
Sweet.
Mm.
All right, Emily, what did you watch this week?
Well, I'd like to start this off by saying that I actually reached a really important milestone last week. I actually watched and reviewed my 100th movie on Letterboxd, so I'm pretty proud of that achievement. I think it's worth mentioning that, like, prior to the beginning of this year, I actually was not a movie person at all. I couldn't really like sustain interest in a movie for the hour and a half or 2 hours that they generally go for. And I just would never really have a desire to actually sit down and watch a movie. But since I have been introduced to Letterboxd, I now have a purpose for my viewings, and yeah, I actually really enjoy watching movies now. So anyway, for my 100th review, I decided that I wanted to watch something that is a little bit special to me. So I actually landed on the 1957 film 12 Angry Men. So that's actually it's the film version of a play that I studied when I was in my final year of school. But I haven't seen the movie in like probably close to a decade. So yeah, it was a fun little mix of a really quality film, and nostalgia, I suppose. But yeah, the film itself, I was so surprised at what a masterpiece it is. Yeah, a bit of background. It's like a courtroom drama. There's a jury of like 12 men, and we pretty much just watch them deliberate over whether this 18-year-old boy should be sentenced to death or if there is reasonable doubt as to whether or not he's guilty. So it all just takes place in the one room. It's black and white because it's a 50s movie. And yeah, at the beginning, all of the jurors vote guilty and are just really keen on getting out of there nice and quickly. But there's this one man, juror 8, who's played by Henry Fonda. And yeah, he kind of challenges them and gets them to rethink some of their morals and values and that sort of stuff. So yeah, on the whole, I think it does a really amazing job of kind of exposing just how flawed humanity is, and also how flawed like the American judicial system can be. And yeah, it kind of just really shines a light on how people's biases and prejudices influence the way that they view the world and other people and everything. So yeah, really quality movie in terms of that sort of stuff. The dialogue and performance were also just incredible in my opinion. And yeah, like for a movie that's literally just taking place in one room, it's all just pretty much dialogue as well. Yeah, I found it really engaging the whole time. So yeah,
Perfect
Adam,
movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
Adam, do you remember watching it?
I also studied it. I didn't rewatch it this week with you guys. I recall it being absolutely phenomenal, especially like for such a simple concept where it's all filmed in a single room. The script is airtight and
Yeah.
like
See, like I didn't fully remember the movie being like amazing. Like I enjoyed studying and everything, but like I didn't remember how the movie was that amazing. So yeah.
I distinctly remember it was sort of like because I'm not great at English, if you can't tell just by my hosting capabilities and my arguments
Oh,
in
Adam,
return.
what do you mean?
But I remember watching this film and actually like it clicking and understanding like the value of cinematography and the value of different characters and the way they act and all that sort of stuff. And it was a great movie to analyze.
Which isn't what we were doing because we were analyzing the play. But yeah.
Will we analyze? Okay, well, there we go.
I'd just like to note that Henry Fonda could probably get a vote not guilty on any jury for any case ever. Seriously, he's that good.
Yeah, yeah, he was as if he was an actual lawyer himself with his dialogue. So we moving on.
Yeah, go for it, Kris.
Yep. So I looked at Child's Play, the 1988 version, not the new one. So in this version, there's a wounded fugitive whose name is Charles Lee Ray. He's been chased by the cops, and while he's being chased, he decides to break into this toy shop. Obviously, as any fugitive is, he's well trained in voodoo, so he was able to perform a spell which transfers his soul into the Chucky doll, or a good guy doll, it's called, and from then on, it's called Chucky after him. So from that point on, he seeks revenge on those that have wronged him and plots his path back into a human form. So yeah, the premise is ridiculous, but luckily most of this happens really quickly. So pretty much the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, you've got rid of all that sort of ridiculous part and you don't really get any time to think about it. So then it gets into the actual movie. They do really well with building the suspense by not overusing the doll within the movie. So when Chucky actually is involved, you sort of feel that tension, and the tension's built really well. There was one stage of the movie where I would compare Chucky as being the Terminator of dolls, or even the Duracell of batteries. He just keeps getting hit and keeps going. But yeah, so as I said, it's meant to be ridiculous, and as long as you go into it with that mindset, you'll enjoy it. A lot of the kill scenes are really good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. And yeah, that's all I've got on that.
I recently, well, over the last couple of months in quarantine, watched the entire Child's Play series, so the original 7 movies, and I was shocked by how good nearly all of them are. Like, obviously there's dips in quality, but for a slasher series, there's no other series that retains this average of quality.
I don't know
Especially
if I can trust your ratings on anything at this point. So
this movie is... So, the best part about this movie is you get past the ridiculous voodoo premise at the start, and it plays itself off like a super serious, straight slasher movie. and it's probably behind Halloween. I reckon it's the second best one you can watch.
Yeah, I think it's really fun.
Uh,
I've only watched the first one recently, but it was really good. I
And
think you'd like Adam.
shout out my boy Andy, because
Yes.
this movie cannot be mentioned without shouting out potentially with Jamie Lee Curtis, the greatest horror film protagonist of all time, Landy from Child's Play.
Yeah, he's a legend.
All right, we might add, so like on like horror side of things, is it more like, is it really bad?
No.
It
No.
just plays like your standard 80s slasher in terms of how scary it is, but it's just done really well.
Okay, I haven't seen slasher, so I've got no point of reference.
Slasher's a genre type, so
Oh,
like
okay.
your Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th,
Kind
Halloween
of got that
style.
the thriller aspect.
Yeah,
To it as well.
yeah.
Okay, maybe something we visit in Let's Scare Adam.
Maybe, yes.
All right, so this week, jumping along, I watched Frank Darabont's film The Mist, and I didn't realize that Frank has also filmed Shawshank Redemption. He also filmed The Green Mile. But so I'm going through this phase where I've been watching Stephen King movies. So yeah, The Mist is essentially after a storm hits a storm hits overnight, a dense cloud of mist starts to envelop a town, and in the mist, monsters. That's the entire premise of it, and it is a bit ridiculous. And the whole time watching it, I suspended disbelief, and it was. I would say that most of the movie I was not totally enthralled with. The monsters are very CG heavy. It's very character driven. They all get stuck inside like a whole town essentially is stuck inside this grocery store because they're all heading to the grocery store after the storms hit. And little by little, people start venturing out into the mist and getting killed essentially by giant monsters, flying bats, those sorts of things. Now, like the whole way through, it was pretty run of the mill. Nothing was terribly terrifying. There were a few like jump scares and stuff like that. However, I'm not going to spoil it because if you haven't seen it, I will say what makes this movie stand out was the ending, the last 15 minutes. The way that this movie ends is I don't even know how to describe it. It's just sort of like a giant. Like I've never seen it happen in cinema like that. I suppose, or it happens very rarely. It kind of gives you a, I want to say like without. I guess it's sort of a bit spoilery, but Game of Thrones like ending.
A bit of a gut punch.
Yeah, yeah, and the ending made the whole film worth it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the movie that I watched this week. I recommend it enough to sit through.
I've seen it. It's good, but yeah, it's very much a movie that sort of is about the ending.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Emily and Kris, have you seen it?
I have when I was younger, but I don't recall all of it. I remember it being like, yeah, as you said, more character driven and more like the shock also being like from the way the people in the supermarket were treating each other and that sort of stuff.
Also,
I
I'm sorry, you go.
I don't remember it, but I had a massive Stephen King theme going in my life between probably like 13 and 16, which is probably not the best time to be doing those movies, but I reckon I may have seen it at some stage.
I will say that, like, are you guys finding that thing at the moment where you're watching like any sort of horror movies or anything like that where there's too many similarities with like real life, just in terms of like the way people act with like businesses?
All horror movies are at the moment.
Oh, it's maddening. There's like this one scene where like there's like this Christian lady and she's like preaching and all the people are like, oh yes, we'll follow her, but they're all the dumb people, and you're just like, I'm just like, this is too close to home at the moment, just with what's happening. Anyways, all right, Josh, what was your second movie?
So I watched The Wicker Man, which is a 1973 English folk horror film that we must not confuse with the 2006 wildly so bad it may be good remake starring Nicolas Cage. This one is directed by Robin Hardy and stars Edward Woodward and the late great Christopher Lee. It tells the story of Police Sergeant Neil Howie, who decides to investigate an isolated island village due to a tip-off about a missing girl. When he gets there, he discovers that the island is totally ran off pagan ideals, which challenges his traditional Catholic faith. The villagers claim either no knowledge of the missing girl or make vague assertions that she may be dead. How he begins to suspect that they are hiding her to sacrifice her for some sort of ritual. That's all I'll say to not spoil anything about the plot, but this movie's mad. I love the folk soundtrack, the bright colours and visuals. I think Midsummer takes a lot of inspiration from this movie, and it has a real iconic ending, which makes the film worth watching once again. Checks in perfectly at 94 minutes, and I gave it 4 stars. For this one, I wouldn't say that it's outright the scary type of horror, but more the feeling of the unknown and that sinking sort of horror. But yeah, enjoyed it.
I'm looking at a picture now and I can already see like comparisons with Midsummer.
Yeah, there's one scene that I was watching and I was like, oh my god. And yeah, it's very, very bright.
Can I ask which? Yeah, so is it the bright scene, the one where she's like tripping out? Midsummer's one of the few movies I've seen.
That is one of them, yeah. There's a lot of comparisons over the course of the film, but the dancing scene in Midsummer is the one I would say.
What a messed up movie Midsummer is.
What a 5-star classic Midsummer is.
Thanks for introducing me to that, Emily. All right, moving on. Emily, what did you watch?
Yeah, so last week I don't know, I felt pretty bad because I spoke really poorly of a movie with Robin Williams in it. I was pretty harsh about Dead Poets Society. So this week I watched Good Will Hunting, which is another movie starring Robin Williams, which I thought was really good. So I'm excited to talk about this one. It was starring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck as well, who were actually writers for the movie, which I thought was really cool. I didn't know that they were writers as well. I thought they just were actors. And yeah, I thought it was awesome. The basic premise is that there's this guy called Will who's working as a janitor at Harvard, and one of the college professors discovers that he's a genius, even though he doesn't attend college or anything like that. And then basically after a run-in with the police, part of this agreement for him being released from prison is that he'll study maths with the professor and also attend therapy sessions, as the professor's kind of learnt that he had quite a tough upbringing, so he hopes to help him work through like some of his self-destructive behaviours and develop better relationships with himself and others. And yeah, overall it's just a really lovely movie. There's something like really human about it. I think it also deals with like concepts of trauma and like being fearful of letting people get too close really well. Made me cry multiple times, because I found it both like sad and beautiful at the same time, so that was a fun time, but not really. And yeah, Robin Williams in this one, he's playing the role of the therapist, Sean, and yeah, he's just awesome. Really, some really lovely, like beautiful, heartfelt scenes with him and Will, which I really liked watching. And yeah, overall I gave it a 4.5. And yeah, it's a really beautiful movie that I think will stay with me for some time.
Ben and Matt actually won the Best Original Screenplay Oscar for this.
Yep, they did. This is the one that like broke their career. And
Massive so early,
Yep.
like crazy. And
Yeah,
shout out to Ben
see
Affleck
why.
for becoming such a great filmmaker too. His directorial skills far outweigh his acting skills. in other cases.
I agree.
I really liked it as well. I reckon it's a great movie. Yeah, just as you said, Robin Williams was really good as the therapist, and Matt, you have to say it as Matt Damon was great in his role as well. So I really liked it.
And I presume it was the speech that made you cry, Em, that Robin Williams gives on the bench?
Yeah, that was part of it.
Yep.
Yeah, just one of the many heartbreaking moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I watched a movie which, for a second when Josh brought it up, I actually thought we were going to be watching Argo, which is a movie that Ben Affleck did produce as well and star himself in. So, bit of a link there. But I actually watched Fargo. So, in Fargo, a classic movie, there's a man in need of money. So he arranges for a couple of crooks who are not very good at their job to kidnap his wife. And then pretty much from that point on, nothing at all goes to plan. So that's essentially the plot line. But the movie is probably, the best part of the movie probably is the cinematography. So it's fantastic in this movie. So there's in particular the snow as a backdrop. It makes for excellent shots, and also some of the some of the scenes look kind of fake because you don't really get perspective and your visual cues are kind of lost, but it just looks stunning at the same time. The movie has an iconic wood chipper scene that it's definitely famous for, and I reckon I mostly loved it for the female lead, whose name is Marge Gunderson, I think, or something like that in real life, but it was Frances in the movie. She's the local law enforcement, and her Canadian accent is just hilarious. Yet at the same time, she does have a really strong character and an intelligent type character as well. So it's not just the silly accent that gets her across the line. It also has William H. Macy in there. For me, it was hard to not see him as the new Shameless character, the American version. But I could actually see some similarities in his dodginess between that and Shameless. And then there was, Steve Buscemi, who you'd probably know from, I think it's 11 or 12 Adam Sandler films. Seems to be in all of them. And that was my review. I gave it a 4 or 4.5, and I think you guys did as well.
I gave it a 4.
I also gave it a 4. I studied this movie in media when I was in school, so I had to watch it about 10 times, and it's still really, really good, but I just can't really be wowed by it anymore. But there is one shot that will wow me until the end of my days, is the shot of the car in the snowy car park when he's just asked for money and he's walking out to the car, and that's one of the shots that I think you might have been referring to that almost doesn't look real.
Yep.
Sort of looks like a toy car. Frances McDormand in the main role is amazing. Potentially one of my favourite female lead characters of all time. And she's actually married to Joel Cohen, who directed this. Well, the Coen brothers directed this, but there was actually a sort of academy rule that you couldn't have two people credited as directing the same movie back then. So they had to choose one to be the writer and one to be the director.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I my sentiments are the same. I really enjoyed this film. I like how it goes from bad to worse.
And just every scene, Frances is just smarter than everyone else in the room. Everyone's so dumb, and she's just processing everything.
Also, her accent is so endearing. Every time she says "yeah," it just keeps going, and I was there for it.
And she has the best, most supportive relationship with her husband both ways.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, it is quite funny. I do also like all the yarns that occur in it too, like some of the guys trying to tell a story, and it's meant to be literally just, what happened? Oh, the guy was over there, but 5 minutes later he's still telling the story. So that's quite amusing.
All right, and lastly, I watched, and I'm using this as my bad film of the week, The Happening, the 2008 M. Night Shyamalan movie. I don't know, I was going through sort of a post-apocalyptic theme this week. This movie is an absolute train wreck. I think the premise is quite good. Essentially, there is something that is causing people to kill themselves, and it starts spreading like wildfire. However, the dialogue choices in this movie, I don't know who was he like whacked out of his brain when he was writing it. It has some of the worst dialogue I think I've ever seen. Mark Wahlberg, the protagonist, and Zoe Deschanel have no chemistry, and when talking to one another are like robots. I don't think Mark Wahlberg is acting in this film. I think he's just like reading lines. I feel like I don't know how, I looked up the stats on this. This movie cost a lot of money to make, and it did get the box office. So it cost $50 million to make, and its box office was $150 million. I don't know how that happened, in all honesty. So this was I looked at the reviews on Letterboxd before I joined, and this was the one that made me laugh the most. Mark Wahlberg gets out-acted by a plant, and I thought that was a funny comment, but there's an actual scene in the film where Mark goes and talks to a plant, because Mark thinks that plants are the reason that people are dying. And it just goes from bad to worse. So They find out that it travels in the wind, or that's what Mark hypothesizes as a science teacher, which they repeatedly tell you that he's a science teacher. There's a scene where they run from the wind. There is an entire dialogue with a random stranger about how hot dogs get a bad rap and they're underrated. What are some of the other things? Oh, he thinks that him and his partner think that they're gonna die, or it's always Chanel, and they have a conversation where she goes, I went and got dessert with another person. And Mark's so upset that he creates a counter lie. I'm not even joking, this is actual dialogue that happens. He creates a counter lie that says that he went up and spoke to a pharmacist when he didn't even need anything. And he made up the story. Like, I can't even describe how bad the dialogue is. And, like, it got to a point where I flipped from this being, like, maybe the worst movie I've ever seen to this is actually slightly enjoyable because of how bad it is. And the way I would describe it is if, like, two people who we would, like, Doreen, that don't have anything to do with the understanding of how this horror situation is happening, just get put through a cycle. And then at the end, there's no resolve. You don't know what's causing it, why it's happening. The people that you're following are just not, like, they just don't know what's happening. Anyways, I don't see this movie. That's the summation of my thoughts on The Happening.
Mark Wahlberg's performance in this is so robotic that it's almost like a computer's done it, and you've put the sliders for, like, emotion and sincerity up to 100, and he's just acting off every single line's the most important line he's ever going to say. It's so ridiculous.
And then there's the math teacher that also is introduced at the start, who just spouts off statistics and facts, which doesn't make any sense because he's a maths teacher. Anyways, yeah, very frustrating. Anyways, all right, so now it is time for our movie of the week, and cue the jingle. The jingle did just play, guys. So the movie for the week is Showgirls, a 1995 movie directed by Paul Verhoeven, starring Elizabeth Berkley, Kyle MacLachlan, and Gina Gershon, among a lot of other people. It had a budget of 40 to 45 million and a box office of only $37.8 million. Why don't you take us away with the plot, Josh?
I think Em might have us on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go through the plot quickly for us today. So, Showgirls, on the surface level, it's more or less about a young woman who wants to put her past behind her and make it as a dancer in Las Vegas. So we're first introduced to our protagonist, Nomi Malone, who's played by Elizabeth Berkley, as she hitchhikes to Las Vegas from some place about 300 miles away. She has dreams of being a dancer and hopes to become a star in one of the glitzy shows held in Vegas. She spends her first few months living with a fashion designer named Molly, while working at Cheetah's Topless Club as a stripper. During that time, she is introduced to Crystal Connors, who's played by Gina Gershon, who is the star of a topless dance show at the Stardust Casino. Crystal ultimately says that her dancing at Cheetah's is the same as her being a whore, and she later goes there with her entertainment director boyfriend, Zach Carey, who's played by Kyle MacLachlan, to prove this by paying $500 for a lap tap dance from her. Following on from this, Crystal arranges an audition for Nomi to be part of the dance show she is a part of, which is called Goddess. She's ultimately successful and gets to quit her job at Cheetah's. It is from here on that we continue to see just how far Nomi is willing to go to become a star. Nomi has a love-hate relationship with Crystal. She doesn't like her personally, but at the same time wants to become her. Crystal, on the other hand, is attracted to Nomi, but equally threatened by her. It doesn't help that there is some underlying sexual tension between Crystal's boyfriend Zach and Nomi, which is probably understandable if you've seen the lap dance scene. Through her connections with these powerful people, Nomi is presented with opportunities to progress and cement her position in the Stardust family. But she soon finds out that there is a cost to being successful in the entertainment industry, and that her morals will come into question if she wants to make it to the top. Okay. So,
I actually have a prepared statement I would like to read out before we get into.
Okay, so just to fill in
Hold
the.
on.
Can we fill in the audience and just let them know that there is a lot of discourse around this movie and what we're rating it?
I think
Go
I
away.
feel strongly that I need to read out this prepared statement.
Just for reference, Josh gave it a 4. Emily gave it a. Oh, sorry. Josh gave it a 4.5. Emily gave it a.
4.5.
Kris gave it a.
3.
I gave it a 1. So, all right. Continue, Josh. Sorry for cutting you off.
So last week, when we were figuring out which movie to make our topic of the week, I suggested watching something bad, as I thought it may make for entertaining listening. So I decided to suggest something that always made lists I'd read when I was growing up that described examples of bad movies. I suggested Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls. Would no doubt be a laugh. I even introduced it to the listeners in an overly snarky and sarcastic tone. Mr. Verhoeven, I apologise for that tone. Suggesting this movie was anything other than genuinely great, which is what it is.
You
I'll
are
try to never make
mad.
this mistake again. I am sorry, and I would just like to note this movie made over $100 million on a home video release. So, in turn, turned a profit.
Yes, it did turn a profit. But because little boy kids who couldn't get access to pornos were probably buying it to rub one out.
Is that really what you thought this movie was?
Okay. No, but I think that's why it made so much at the home. Like,
Potentially, but
they definitely didn't do it for the story.
They should have.
All right. So what? All right. So I guess let's. What was everyone's first impressions of the movie? Obviously, Josh loved it. Why did you love it, Josh? Tell me more. Why do you think that this is a 4.5 out of 5 star? Please.
Well, apart.
He said a 5 too.
Yeah, it is definitely nearly a 5. This is one of the finest examples of dark social satire I have ever seen in my life. That's as bluntly as I can put it.
With no intention.
Was it that it was satire?
What was that?
Whose commentary was it that it was satire?
I thought it was pretty obvious by watching the film that it was satire, and Paul Verhoeven's a widely renowned satirist.
Okay.
Okay. So, just to put... So I came with a very well-prepared argument because I thought that I needed to fight. All right, so can you in good conscience say that this is a 4.5 star out of 5 star movie? When it starts off with Naomi Malone, gets in the... Naomi. Sorry, how dare I? Gets into a car with a slimy hitchhiker, pulls out a knife of him, no issues there, car keeps going. This is the first 10 minutes of the film. Then she gets taken into the casino. The guy runs off to try and get her a job. She loses all the money, comes outside to her car. Car's gone. Then she starts cracking it, starts slapping the car next to it. Lady, who then becomes friends, comes into the thing, goes, "What are you doing slapping my car?" They then have a fight. Naomi, for some reason, vomits. Naomi, whatever. Vomits. This is how much I care about this film. Vomits. Then the two of them, for some reason, lovingly embrace with one another. Then Naomi cracks the shits and runs out into the middle of the road. Then scene change. The lady who has seen Naomi in fret, I suppose, takes her out to dinner, buys her a big box of chips. Naomi just all of a sudden, with no reason, totally cracks the tantrum and throws the chips all over the ground. Then there's a scene change, and 6 weeks later, they're living like they're best friends. You're telling me this is a 4 out of 5? You're insane!
Honestly, Adam, when I was preparing for this, I was genuinely worried you'd have some really critical points that I wouldn't know how to counter, or that you'd have some
I've got so much more.
But not one of those points mentions the fact that... Have you ever heard of the term camp? Do you know what a camp movie is?
You're giving it a 4.5, though. This is the crux of the issue.
Choice. It is a completely deliberate choice. How was that? That was.
But all right. So all right.
I've ever seen.
It's not entertaining. It's just bad writing. It's like she's acting unrealistically.
That she was directed to act like that though. There's like an interview with Van Hoven where he's like,
15 years later is the interview. 15 years later. Sorry.
Okay, hold on. What about in the book that he wrote as this was coming out, where he said he wanted to make something that had cartoonish qualities?
It's not even cartoonish. It's like, it'd be different if it was cartoonish and Nomi acted the same way throughout, but she's so flippant in her like decisions and like the way that she acts. Also, like putting her the way she acts in just in that first scene, not to mention throughout the whole film, which she's a psychopath. There's characters that are introduced that literally bring nothing to the story and just add no value. So what I'm referring to, of course, is the bouncer. The bouncer gets introduced.
Wait, which one?
The
one who...
Yeah, the bouncer gets introduced. They meet on a dance floor. Nomi's an absolute bitch to him. Knees him in the balls. Nomi then gets taken to the jail. Then for some reason, bouncer bails her out. Nomi totally flogs him off. Then all of a sudden, he rocks up 3 days later and they like lovingly embrace. Then they go out on this date where he's like, oh, I'm going to take you to the best restaurant around. They're in a convertible eating burgers.
with that though, isn't that after he runs into her after she has like a bad audition for Stardust and he comforts her and that's why she's like, okay, I'll go on a date with you?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Yep, that is.
Yep.
But then they go, like, I'll give you that. Like, the lap dance is extremely, like, outrageous. Like, just outrageous. For
This was not supposed to be sexy. Like, did you actually think this movie was supposed to be sexy?
She did get paid $500 for that lap dance, so she proved her point about not being a sex worker.
Yeah, and then, like, just to, like, jump to... Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. But then to jump to, like, other things. So she's talking about, like, how she has all these standards. And, like, the film makes it very clear that when she works at the Cheetahs strip club, that she needs to provide the manager with blowjobs. And then...
But she doesn't.
But, like, that's what it implies in the film. I watched it twice. And, like, it's like, oh, you can dance on the stage, but you also have to give me blowies in the outside. And then she gets invited to the hotel where the actual other strip dance is. And she's doing the auditions and she succeeds. And then the thing that stops her, like, you got to ask yourself, like, why does she have a moral line at rubbing ice on her tits to make them perky when she's doing a topless dance?
I don't think that was like a moral thing though. I think that was more just like humiliating to be like handed blocks of ice and.
But like, where does the humiliation lie? There's no like line in humiliation. They're talking about her being cummed on in like the cheetah strip club, and then they go and do this audition where the guy goes, "You just need perkier tits." Rub some ice on them, and she like flips it and throws it away. That's not good storytelling.
I don't know. Oh yeah. I can't see any like social criticisms of the exploitation women go through in the entertainment industry at all.
But see,
None
like,
of these are hitting at all.
I understand, like the thing is, I understand like the exploitation side of it, and I get like how show business like builds that, and I understand that like that is a theme in the movie. I just don't think it was executed well. I think that the movie itself is poor. The themes are good. Like, the script could have been 1,000 times better with better writing and got the same message across. I just don't think it's a good film. Like, I can't recommend anyone to see this. If you want to see tits for 2.5 hours, then this is the movie for you, though.
I could not agree less that if you want to see tits for 2 hours, this is the movie for you. Because the whole point of there being so many tits is that it's not sexy.
To normalise it.
And no, I don't even necessarily think it's to normalise it. I think it's to show that, especially, so you're talking about the bouncer, right? You know the
Sure.
scene where she goes to see his sort of artistic, sensual dance scene,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that I viewed that scene as a criticism of the critics of this film themselves, where you can't. Verhoeven's not an American, right? So this was an attack on American values and the way they perceive nudity, and the way they put sexuality into a box as well. The way men use it to establish power. That scene showed me that. So there's this guy who's trying to present nudity to tell a story or to have some sort of artistic merit. And what are the crowd screaming for? They don't want to see this. They just want to see your standard strippers on stage, getting it off, trying to be sexy. So that was how I felt he was integral to the message of the film. And yeah,
Fair. Emily, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I enjoyed it. Obviously, I gave it a 4.5 as well.
But do you think it's a good movie? Like, do you think that, like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think
You think
part of
it's
what
worth a
helped
4?
me- Part of what helped me, part of what helped me, like when I was viewing this movie was that or actually afterwards, it was when I was processing what I'd just watched after the movie. I realized that the director is the same guy who directed RoboCop. Okay, and so as soon as I realized that, I was like, okay, it all makes sense. Like RoboCop is obviously a movie that's kind of like, again, another satire, but it's more looking at that utilizes like excessive violence and that sort of stuff, which is much the same in terms of Showgirls, where there's like all the excessive nudity. It all seems really over the top, but it's all really intentional. So I think knowing, in terms of like Verhoeven and the sort of director that he is, I think that it's really hard to look at this and be like, oh, nah, it's just shit. They didn't mean to do any of that. It just is shit, and they didn't do it well.
can I just ask Adam, have you seen the film Starship Troopers?
Yes, I have.
Do you enjoy the film Starship Troopers?
For the most part, from what I remember, I would have seen it like 5, 10 years ago. Yeah.
What would you say it's about?
Aliens attack and gung ho group of people have to fight them.
Whereas it's actually a criticism of state-run propaganda and blind patriotism. It is Paul Verhoeven's style to put such messages into genre films, and this one's especially important in terms of the generation we currently live in the post-Harvey Weinstein Hollywood, and the implicit sexual flavors that the girls should be performing in this film, that this film approaches in a negative light, I might add.
Yeah, absolutely. And like just to add on that, so I guess as part of the fun facts, Showgirls is definitely one of those films that when it first came out, it had no critical acclaim. However, lots of those critics are now going back to it in the last 10 years and rating it much higher. And I think that has a lot to do with what you were saying. So that was one of my fun facts. One of the other fun fact is Tarantino absolutely loves the film.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, he loves it as an exploitation film.
Which it is. Let me just add that this is an exploitation film about exploitation.
I think that my issue is really like at its core, I just don't think it's a good movie. Like I understand like that he is a director who has done lots of satirical films. I don't feel like that was. This is my first viewing, and I went into it blind. Like I don't think that it achieves that. I feel like only the discourse. Like you gotta like this is a 1995 film. Like this, I don't know. I don't think it's a good movie, and I don't think that people should check it out.
I can't agree because I found it genuinely enjoyable. And when it ended, I literally said to myself, I did not watch a bad movie. I watched a very deliberately camp and entertaining movie, and all those outfits were absolute fire. And sad for a 1990s movie, it was so refreshing to have no gay jokes for humor, but in fact we had a straight joke that made me actually laugh out loud.
I was probably, as I said, I was directly in between the two of you. So for me, it's definitely not a 1. I'm definitely not going the end that Adam thought. As you guys have already said, essentially replicating what Vegas is like. So trashy, dog eat dog world. In particular, the entertainment industry for females, it's even worse. So it definitely hit the mark on that, saying how exploited females can be in industry, in the entertainment industry. So I was like, I reckon it did hit the mark with that. But on the other side, I can't see it being up with the greatest movies of all time, being at the 4.5 to 5 category. Adam's already mentioned the tone of Naomi's character being like up and down all the time. Not really, for me, it didn't really match the scenes a lot of the time. Like, she became quite unlikable, and sometimes it impacted the storyline. Like, you were kind of like, why is she acting like this? This girl's been really nice to her at the start, and now why is she throwing the food in her face? As Adam was saying, the whole thing with that James Smith guy, I thought that was going to lead into something. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a massive plot line here. But then, no appreciation after he bails her out. And then he just appears again towards the end, and it's like, oh, I've got a girl pregnant, and that's the end of that plot line. So I felt like that wasn't done very well. The way she sleeps with Zach to get at Crystal, again, that's
The worst sex scene you've ever seen on cinema.
Which was also intended to be funny. And it was, by the way, I was laughing.
So satire or not, I did a bit of research too. So I remember I'm in between. I didn't mind it. I was like a 3, maybe a 3.5. Verhoeven has implied it was meant to be a sincere movie in quite a few of his comments. However, he did indicate some of it was meant to be a bit more comedic value, a little bit of satire, I suppose. But he did say it was meant to be a sincere movie. It was, as Adam said, later on, he, after all the, well, not critical acclaim, the reverse, that maybe an opinion may have changed. To put this in a nutshell, right, I feel like this movie, for us and for everyone that watches it, it's like going to an art gallery. You see what you want to see in the art, even if it wasn't the artist's intention or the director's intention. So that's my kind of opinion on this. I don't know, you guys are going to disagree, but that's what I feel about this movie.
I read that Verhoeven said that he said this was a serious film, maybe not a sincere film, which I wholly agree. This is a serious film, and I hope no one's mistaken me for thinking the term satire means comedy, because it doesn't in the slightest. Satire isn't implying funny at all.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think that if anyone has any final thoughts, I think that it's good that we all have very different opinions on this film. And while we don't always have to agree with each other.
I do disagree though, and I do think that people should watch this movie because I think it is quite polarizing, as you can tell. All of us have quite varied views on the film, so I think it is worth watching just so you can establish for yourself whether it is a 4 or 4.5 or a 5 even, if it is somewhere in the middle, or if it is only deserving of a 1, which I strongly disagree with personally.
Definitely not a 1. If anything, it is not a 1.
Yeah. But I still think even if the outcome you arrive at is that it is trash or whatever, at least you have had the opportunity to view it and make that decision yourself.
Well put, Em. Well put.
Thanks.
All right, and with that, we have finished this segment. So, what do you guys want to watch as the movie of the week for next week?
I think we'll go with Babyteeth next week.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Excellent. Look, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Film School, episode 6. We hope you enjoyed listening to the discourse around Showgirls, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for listening.